What happened to America? We used to be a country that made things, but these days, you don't see much of it anymore. Where are all the factory jobs? Where are all the farmers who used to form the backbone of this country? Actually, we know the answer to this question. Those jobs went away because Americans got way richer than we used to be. Wait, what? There's a time-honored tradition in American politics. When a politician wants your vote, they promise they're going to create jobs, usually millions of them. And here's the weird thing about those pledges. A lot of economists will tell you they're a bad idea. Well, kind of. Allow us to explain. The way that politicians talk about employment is often pretty misleading. In some cases, what they mean when they say they're going to create jobs is that the economy is going to be so good that lots of people will be hiring new workers. And that's fair enough, so far as it goes. Our elected officials make decisions about lots of issues like taxes, regulation, or trade that do have real impacts on the job market. But too often, politicians also promise that they're going to create lots of jobs in a specific field. And that's where things start to get a little shaky. For a good example of this, consider manufacturing. For decades now, we've been hearing politicians proclaim that America's manufacturing sector has been decimated and that they'll be the ones to bring jobs back. Now, you can kind of see where they're coming from. At its peak in the late 1970s, about 19.5 million Americans worked in manufacturing. In the intervening years, around 1/3 of those jobs, about 6.5 million, have gone away. That line looks like this, which seems like a pretty depressing story. But where things get confusing is when you add in this line, which shows that our actual manufacturing output is near an all-time high. Now, unless you have an economics degree, and if you do, please seek help, this probably seems wildly counterintuitive. How can an industry be hemorrhaging jobs and be massively successful at the same time? The answer to that question is actually one of the secrets to why America is so wealthy. The explanation we often hear for the decline in American manufacturing jobs is that many of them moved overseas. And while that's true in some cases, it's actually a pretty small part of the story. In fact, research looking at the manufacturing job losses of the 2000s, the decade with by far the sharpest downturn, estimated that only a little over 13% of them were lost to international competition. By contrast, around 88% of those jobs were lost to productivity gains. And we think we speak for the entire nation when we say, to what now? For most of us, productivity sounds like the word your boss uses when he explains why you really shouldn't be playing Grand Theft Auto in the middle of a meeting. Yeah, Dave can be a real buzzkill sometimes. But for economists, productivity has a very specific meaning. The amount of inputs needed to generate a specific amount of output. For those of you who don't speak nerd, here's what that means. As companies get better at producing something, they need fewer employees to produce the same amount of it. As a practical example of this, the American steel industry's output was 8% higher in 2017 than it was in 1980. Yet over that same period, its workforce shrunk by over 3/4. Thanks to better technology and more efficient production processes, it just took a lot fewer people to make the same amount of steel. Now, on first blush, this sounds slightly terrifying. The better we get at doing things, the fewer jobs there'll be. But as luck would have it, that's actually the opposite of how this works. In reality, because productivity gains make goods and services cheaper, they tend to increase the demand for those goods and services, which in turn leads to the creation of other new jobs to meet that demand. And because more productive employees are more valuable employees, it often leads to pay increases as well. And because you then live in a world where people make more and goods cost less, society as a whole becomes wealthier. That's why the Nonpartisan Congressional Research Service refers to productivity growth as the most consequential determinant of long-term economic growth and substantive improvements in individual living standards. And if this all still seems a little abstract, think of it in the context of your own life. Imagine you suddenly had to get by with the technology of 1900. No washing machine or dryer, no microwave, no vacuum, no dishwasher. Imagine, in other words, that you live in Europe. Don't worry about the comments. We're pretty sure they don't have the internet yet. If you suddenly lost all of that technology, how many other things would you have to stop doing? How much time would you have to give up just to take care of your basic needs? We actually know the answer to this question thanks to the calculations of researchers who discovered that the average American household spent about 58 hours a week on meal prep, laundry, and cleaning in 1900. In the years since all that technology has come along, that number has dropped to around 15. Now, sure, if none of those things had ever been invented, there'd be more jobs for housekeepers, dishwashers, and personal cooks, but we'd all be poorer, including those housekeepers, dishwashers, and personal cooks. And in industry after industry, you see this trend. Between 1948 and 2017, for example, the amount of labor used on American farms decreased by 76%. But thanks to things like better machinery, better farming techniques, and better seeds, the output of America's farms nearly tripled in that same period. In fact, this is how insane productivity gains can get. Today, farmers even get more milk per cow than they did 40 years ago. And yet no jobs program for the cows. Typical heartless Washington. Bottom line, good jobs are essential for the economy. But good jobs aren't created by politicians. They're created by increased productivity. And when that happens, the result is higher pay, a wealthier country, and more free time for us to focus on the things that really matter. By which we mean getting back to Grand Theft Auto. Suck it, Dave.